Civil War Talk Radio with Jerry Prokopowicz. Today we're talking with a guest who's on the front lines in a number of ways. Historically, studying the Battle of the Crater in 1864. Historiographically, looking at new ways to interpret the battle. Technologically, recording his thoughts online in a blog for all to read. And educationally, at the very front line, where the rubber meets the road, teaching the Civil War to high school students in Virginia. Join us today with Kevin Levin on Civil War Talk Radio.
Honey, what was that website we were going to look at to save on our energy bill?
I wrote it down. Here it is. It's energysavers.gov.
Saving money on your energy bill is just a few clicks away. I'm Energy Secretary Spence Abraham. For useful tips that can help you save on your energy bill every day, check out our webpage, energysavers.gov.
Hey, this is great. We can start saving today.
Remember when you laughed during a business conference? You felt more energized, more alert, and more receptive to the message being delivered. Hi, I'm Russ Stolnack, and I make people laugh. And as a professional humorous speaker, I open up a morning conference session with a laugh or close off the day with a funny recap. It's just a one-of-a-kind experience. Visit russisfunny.com right now. Get an audience into it. You know, if they're laughing, it's paying big dividends. They're more relaxed, they're more creative, and if nothing else, a humorous speaker leaves each and every one of them with a smile on their face. You need comedy. Custom, clean, clever comedy. Otherwise, your audience might just doze off. Just imagine, if you had to listen to hours of serious commentary without a break, come on. Pack some upbeat energy into your next event. Humor works. Find me, Russ Stolnack, at russisfunny.com because, well, russischubby.com was taken.
World Talk Radio, bringing the world to you.
To reach a show host or guest during the live show, dial toll-free in North America 866-613-1612. Or if outside the USA and Canada, dial 001-858-268-3068.
Welcome to Civil War Talk Radio. I'm Jerry Prokopowicz, coming to you today from the Civil War Talk Radio home office in Greenville, North Carolina, which is my own home office and not on the campus of East Carolina University, where the show normally originates, as the summer schedule is upon us now. But still not speaking for East Carolina or its minions or a chancellor or indeed anybody, just myself and the guest for himself. It occurs to me in some past shows I've forgotten to give that boilerplate legal warning, and there is a legal doctrine I recall dimly from my days of practicing law many years ago, ad justum generis or some other good Latin phrase, in which if you mention parts of a series but leave some out, the exclusion is considered to be significant. So if you go back and listen to all the archives and find the shows where I failed to say I was not speaking for East Carolina University, perhaps you can work up some kind of lawsuit based on the university saying outrageous things and offending or upsetting people, and they have much deeper pockets than I do. I've no point suing me as a state university paid professor. That's not going to get you anywhere. But the university, that could work. I probably shouldn't have given that advice either. Today's show not only comes from the home office, but comes from the home office where I'm staring at a blank screen as the home computer has made some very bad noises and has been shut down to avoid a complete hard drive malfunction. So we're coming to you with 19th century technology. I've found a pen and a pad of paper on which to write down my thoughts about today's show. I've not done this in several years. I'm not sure I can read the writing. So it carries the very air of the 19th century as we use old technology. On top of that, again, apologizing for burdening you with personal items. I'm suffering from some sort of allergy that causes me to have most unpleasant coughing fits. So if anyone is still listening at this point, prepare for what will otherwise be a wonderful show. And perhaps this would be a good show in which to donate, perhaps out of sympathy. Donations to the Civil War Talk Radio Fund are always welcome, and anything received this week will be put toward the purchase of a new hard drive to replace the one that seems to be going down even as we are speaking here today. But enough about that. Let's get to the show. Our guest, as the introduction pointed out, is Kevin Levin. Kevin, are you there?
I am here. How you doing, Jerry?
I've done better in the past, but I'm better now that I hear your voice. I'm glad.
Well, we'll work through this together.
That sounds good. Usually the guests we have on the show can be categorized in a word or two, a professor or a reenactor or a museum curator or some other single role. But you've got a number of roles. Let me start with your background. Tell what got you interested in the Civil War in the first place?
What got me interested? Well, that's an interesting question for me to answer here. I definitely have a different story from the ones that I typically hear on your show. I mean, usually you hear of stories that involve a young boy of 4 or 5 traveling to a Civil War battlefield, or perhaps even being given that wonderful book, the one that came out in the early 1960s that everyone talks about, the American Heritage book.
That's right.
I'm sort of a latecomer to the Civil War. I grew up about 5 blocks from the beaches along the Jersey Shore, and about 5 blocks from the closest casino. So I had different interests, I guess, when I was, growing up. And I actually didn't come to the Civil War until my mid-20s. And I was to make a long story short, I was majoring in philosophy of all subjects as a graduate student at the University of Maryland, and my advisor lived out in Boonesboro. So, of course, you can now begin to piece together where this is going. And I used to go out there to dog sit, and while he would go off to conferences and other things. And I think my first trip, he gave me a list of things to do in the area, and, of course, one of them was the Antietam battlefield. And I still remember my first trip to that battlefield. I really had no background in the Civil War, and I ended up on a tour with Ted Alexander. And I think some of your listeners will know that name. He's now the chief historian out at Antietam. And I went on a tour with Ted, and I was hooked. I still have difficulty explaining, what that hook involved, but I was fascinated by the stories and the landscape. I think the landscape more than anything else, and looking at the monuments and trying to imagine for myself what took place in September of 1862. And I remember going back the following few days. I picked up, I picked up Stephen Sears, his book on the battle, and I read through that book while I walked the battlefield. So that was, like I said, I'm sort of a latecomer to the study of the Civil War. I'm sort of catching up, I guess, to others. I can't say that I'm not just a bit envious of those stories of, walking on the battlefields with parents and those types of stories.
Well, you never know when the bug will strike. Antietam was the first battlefield I visited, and it did have that effect on me. But I was there with my 2 younger brothers, and they thought it was interesting, but it didn't change their lives. And sometimes one has to be older, and the moment happens when it happens.
That's right. Now, my parents at one point tried to take me to Williamsburg when I was 9 or 10, and it didn't stick. I was a miserable kid for those few days, probably just waiting. I guess when you grow up close to the beach in the summertime, it's hard to compete with that. I think that's what they were up against. So I guess this kind of interest had to wait for just the right moment.
You said you were studying philosophy in college or graduate school.
Yeah.
And is that your educational specialty then, or your educational background?
That's my first master's degree, and I graduated from Maryland in '95. And I more recently decided to go back and do another. This is sort of after I became much more interested in writing about the Civil War, and trying to think of ways to open more doors for things like publishing. And so I decided to go back and do another graduate degree, and so I chose the University of Richmond. And I spent 3 years. Of course, I was teaching full-time, so I couldn't finish, I guess, in the normal 2-year span. I took an extra year, and I had a great experience. I studied with a wonderful historian, Robert Kenzer, who focuses on the Civil War, and beyond. And it was a great experience. And I finished that. I finished last May 2005.
Yeah. If you see him, give him my greetings. He and I corresponded when I was at the Lincoln Museum many years ago, and I don't know that I've seen Dr. Kenzer in boy, I don't know how long, but do say hello for me.
I will indeed.
So then you were studying history, and you said you were teaching full time. Where was that?
Well, I've been here at St. Anne's Belfield, which is in Charlottesville, since 2000. And so this is, I guess you could say I just finished my 6th year at this school. Before that, I spent 2 years teaching philosophy at a math and science school down in Mobile, Alabama. And I was happy to move back closer to New Jersey, closer to my parents. But I've been here in Charlottesville for 6 years. And we love it here. Obviously, as a historian, this is an ideal place to live. So,
it certainly is. Now, what kind of things do you teach at this high school, a K-12 school?
Yeah, it is a K through 12. I teach mainly juniors and seniors in the upper school, and my responsibilities include teaching the survey course in American history, including the advanced placement, the AP classes. And then I'm allowed, all of us in the history department, we're able to offer electives, and we really have full range in terms of the kinds of courses that we offer. And over the last few years, I've been offering a Civil War elective, and it's taken on different shapes, but it's a popular class. And given my interests, and given what you can do with students, teaching a class in Central Virginia in terms of what's available, what's a few hours away by bus, really the sky's the limit. And so for the last 5 years now, I've been offering an elective on the Civil War. Next year I'm going to change it up a little bit, but I'll keep the Civil War in there at least for one of those 2 semesters. We operate on a semester schedule.
Let me ask you a bit about the survey course, which anyone teaching at the college level or the advanced high school level it comes across sooner or later. You have to teach it at most places.
Yeah.
The general U.S. history, which, in my experience at East Carolina University, is often filled with students who are there because they need to take a social science course. They're not particularly interested in the subject.
Right.
Indeed, the ones who are most interested have taken your AP course in high school and placed out of the requirement to take a survey in college. So, by definition, it's the less interested student. Now, in high school, American history is a required subject,
right?
As I understand it. Well, you can't open, you can't have a discussion on education today, certainly at the high school level, without getting strong opinions on all sides. And frequently, you will hear people, you'll hear people argue that our students today are woefully ignorant, can't locate what century the Civil War took place in. You'll see newspaper articles with surveys showing how little students know. What's your experience there?
Well, a new batch of those statistics just came out. I think the number I remember was 65% can't even pick out Iraq on a map, which is disturbing on a number of different levels. My experience, it's tough to answer that question because my experience teaching in a private school, teaching small classes. I mean, the average size of one of my survey classes is maybe 13 or 14 students. So, given that many public school teachers, and I really respect what they do and what they're up against, upwards of 30 students in these classes, it's very difficult for me to, at least from a personal perspective, to gauge what kids know and what they don't know. Here at St. Anne's, they know a little bit. The last history class that most of them have taken is back in 7th grade. And, my job, as I see it in the survey course, is to I think, take them out of that more, for lack of a better word, sort of patriotic, very narrow perspective on U.S. history. Not that the opposite perspective is where I want to take them, but to get them to a point where they're able to see U.S. history from multiple perspectives. That, to me, is the primary goal. I think it's clear that, Americans in general have very little interest in in history, as much as we claim to be interested. This tension between those two positions is, I find, very interesting.
Well, what about that, though? Don't you? I mean, when you go to a battlefield, you go to Gettysburg, it's packed. You go in the summer, it's full of people. You watch the History Channel. There's something on Discovery Channel's doing history. A&E is doing history. Don't you? I would argue that Americans are interested in history, but they're not very interested in history classes, which is a different story altogether.
It might be a way to create some category that would fit these people in. I'm not sure what you would call it. And you might be right. I might have the numbers. I might have I might be off in that sense. At least here, I mean, it's a class that students take because it's required. And I have a few every year who finish the class with a more enthusiastic sort of observation of American history. But I would say most of them just, continue on. I don't know if they will be required to take another history class in college. I tend to see it as really the only chance for most of them to get some kind of grasp of American history, the important events, the important people, and more importantly, just the sort of analytical tools to think about American history, or to think about the past in general.
Well, you talked about having multiple perspectives, and the phrase that flashed into mind there is critical thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not so much you're teaching them to forget their old interpretation and learn your new one, but rather to...
That's right. I mean, I emphasize more than anything else the analysis of documents, multiple documents, and out of that trying to create an interpretation on their own through newspapers, through speeches, and other kinds of primary sources. So if I can give them that tool, and as much of the content as possible, then I think I've succeeded. And of course, that's not sort of talking. We're not here talking about, well, what are the essentials in the American history course? I mean, I think that's another interesting question. But for the way I see it, my goal, as I think about them going off to college, is really the skills that they can use in any history class, and then in other classes that they're going to be tackling in their college years.
But they do come out of your class knowing what the two sides were in the Civil War, and
Absolutely.
Which side won, for example.
Yeah, they get the Civil War is definitely emphasized in the survey course. And every year I try to mix it up just a little bit in terms of what I look at the Civil War, because I find also that the teacher has to keep it interesting. It really isn't much fun going through the same shtick year after year. So this past year we looked at a little bit more, I should say, of the women's role in the Civil War. And in previous years, it'll be the soldier's perspective. All of these are emphasized every year, but just to keep it, a little bit that sense that it's new for the teacher, that there's a little bit more excitement there than just going through it, year after year. But yeah, I like to think that they leave my class with a solid understanding of American history. To what extent that's actually true, of course, that's a different problem, perhaps. And the other issue that I really do emphasize in my class, and I make this very clear up front, I think the most important issue in American history, especially for my students who really don't have much familiarity with it, as much as you think they would, that is the issue of race, the issue of slavery, and then out of that, or along with that, the issue of race. And I think those themes they obviously course throughout American history, and I think that I have an obligation to really give them a deeper sense of how it's shaped American history, both from a number of different angles. And I make that clear. It's never easy talking about it in class. There's a certain defensiveness about it, but I think it's important nonetheless.
Now, your own historical research and writing is focused to some extent on the Battle of the Crater.
That's right.
And we'll talk about that in our next segment. I want to get back to that, but certainly race plays an issue, plays a role in how that battle developed.
Absolutely.
Are most of the students that you teach white?
Yes.
So that,
Absolutely.
again, will affect their perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that creates some opportunity, and it also limits the kinds of discussions that you can have in class, because I think the racial perspective is very important.
Well, we're going to take a break here.
Sure.
And come back in just a moment and talk more with our guest, Kevin Levin. We'll talk about his research on the Battle of the Crater in 1864 when we return on Civil War Talk Radio.